Okay, I think I got my microphone back now. This week, I want to talk about simplicity, basically. I'd like to start out by reading a passage, short passage from Lao Tzu from the Tao Te Ching. Lao Tzu writes, he says, the supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without trying to. It's content with the low places that people disdain. Thus it is like the Tao. Thus it is like the Tao. In dwelling, live close to the ground. In thinking, keep it to the simple. In thinking, keep it to the simple. In conflict, be fair and generous. In governing, don't try to control. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present. When you are content to be simply yourself, and don't compare or compete, everyone will respect you. That's cool and wonderful. I bet she's happy. Okay. But Lao Tzu, he says, when you are content to be simply yourself, and don't compare or compete, everyone will respect you. So to be the simple self, the self that is simply sufficient to just be here, it does not need to become anything else, that can rest from its labors in being okay with being okay with itself, that knows its righteousness from awareness, rather than thinking itself to be right, and defending itself. Because, see, beloved, you can't think yourself into righteousness. You can't think yourself into righteousness. Justification that arises from rationalization is not true justification. It's not true justification because it's dependent upon the rationalization, which changes like the direction of the wind. Rationalization comes from the mind, and the mind changes, because the mind is impermanent. So righteousness is what is known by the heart. It has nothing to do with what the mind thinks itself to be. Righteousness has nothing to do with what the mind thinks itself to be. Righteousness is a gift of God. You can only receive it. You can't create it. Nothing you can do to make yourself righteous. Nothing you can do to make yourself right. Because it's already been given to you. It's a gift. It's already been given to you. All you need to do is receive it. Okay? So anyway, Lao Tzu says, when you're content to be simply yourself, and don't compare or compete, everyone will respect you. So, do we know who the simple person that we are? Do we know that person, the simple person? Do we know that one without the second? that doesn't attain its identity by comparing itself with other people, that can just simply be without competing to be this or that. That in need of nothing needs to say nothing to gain another's approval or defend oneself. That person. Can we be the simple self? Do we know that simple man who can be without being recognized? Who can be without being recognized? Fitting into the picture so precisely, so willingly, adeptly, that one is the picture. That needs no recognition from others to be. Such a one is simple in being. And such a one that is simple in being has the greatest influence. Has the greatest influence. So Lao Tzu says, when you're content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everyone will respect you. Everyone will. But there's this simpleness in being. And when we're in that flow of simpleness of being, that flow of simplicity. I don't know if I'm using a good word there or not, but that spot, that flow, that place of simplicity. When we're in that state of being simply who we are, we have the greatest influence. Because we become camouflaged in the obvious. Needing no recognition to be, we're camouflaged in the obvious. We fit into that picture so well. We fit into the moment so well. We fit into the scene that's here now so well without opposing it, without contending with it, that we become it. Thus, we become camouflaged in the obvious, because we're in no resistance to the actuality of the moment. Camouflage in the obvious rather than selling oneself, trying to sell oneself to others to get them to buy into our game, you see. Camouflaged in the obvious. One is like the sunlight, not seen with the eye, yet revealing all things in its presence. By its presence alone. Without a word. Without needing to say a word. Do we understand that nature of sunlight? Go out in the yard sometime during the daytime. Simply look down at the green grass below your feet there. The light that's there between you and the grass. Do you see it? Or do you just see the grass? You don't see the light, you see the grass. Yet the light is there, or you wouldn't see the grass. The grass reflects the light. It's the reflection of the light that you see. The light itself that manifests the grass, you don't see that. It's unseen. There's that clarity between your eye and the grass. And so likewise the master, unseen, makes all things known. Likewise the master, unseen, makes all things known. Fitting into the picture so willingly, adeptly, that present so completely that his presence isn't even noticed. That's when we have the greatest influence. That's when we have the greatest influence upon the world. When we're really, really present as the light of the world, as the salt of the earth, as that loving presence. It's there without condition. So it's good that we take heed and with all earnestness consummate first your betrothal to yourself. Consummate first your betrothal to yourself. Consummate first your betrothal to yourself. Let your vow to be faithful, to be you, be the first thing. Let your vow to be faithful, to be you, come first. To your own self, be true. To your own self, be true. To your own self, be faithful. To your own self, be true. Because, see, beloved, you can't be faithful. You can't be faithful to God unless you're first faithful to yourself. How could you be? If we want to be faithful to God in our relationship with God, we first must be faithful to ourselves. So being faithful to ourselves, being true to ourselves, we can allow and let the relationship we have with the world form around us. We can let that relationship with the world form around us come out of us. Come out of us. Come out of us. And in the coming out of us, we were able to when the relationship comes out of us, we can transform the world by the presence that we bring to it. When the relationship with the world of form comes out of us, then we can transform that world by the presence that we bring to it. Because you have to remember that world of form, that world is yours. It's all yours. It's your baby. Precious one, meek one. Be the light and the salt that you are. Be the light that you are, the salt that you are. rather than conforming to the world system's demands, to be someone that you're not. Come to know yourself as yourself. Know yourself as yourself. Make that your priority, to know yourself as yourself. Make that your priority. Let that come before forming relationships with other people. First, form a relationship with yourself before trying to form a relationship with someone else. First, form a relationship with yourself. Make it a good one before trying to form a relationship with others. Know who you are first. Know who you are first. And when you know who you are first, then you can be yourself with others. You can be yourself with them in knowing who you are first. By knowing who you are without them there. By knowing who you are without them there. By knowing who you are without them there. If you know who you are without them there, then you can be yourself in their presence. So this spending time in solitude, this getting alone with yourself so that you can come to know yourself, so that you can be yourself in the presence of others. Oh, this is so essential. This is so vital that we get quiet, that we get away from the crowds in the marketplace. That we give ourselves space and permission and time just to be, just to be, just to be. Then we can be present as ourselves in the presence of others. When you know yourself as you are. With no one else around. With all the thoughts, with all the feelings, with all the notions. Many of which you may have run from and preferred not to see. In solitude and silence, sitting with those things that we sought to avoid, fearlessly, patiently, willingly, we find that the presence that we bring to those things transforms them. When we bring the light of who we are to them, it takes away their bite. It takes away their 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 fierceness. It takes away their power to intimidate us. And when those things cannot intimidate us anymore, that we've tried to suppress, that we've tried to avoid bringing our attention to, when in solitude, those things intimidate us no more, then in the presence of other people, we find that we are not intimidated by them. And not being intimidated by them, we can love them. We can love them. So it's first to know. The first thing we must do is get quiet and know ourselves as this unconditional presence. This presence without conditions. Who we can be without conditions. Who are you without conditions? Who are you without your conditioning? Who am I without my conditioning? Ask yourself that. Ask yourself, who am I? Who am I without my conditioning? Who am I without my fears? Who am I without my greed? Who am I without my anger? Who am I without my notions and beliefs that fed all that? Know that person. Sit still with yourself. Sit still with yourself. Befriend yourself. When you know yourself as you are, there is nothing that you're not. When you know yourself as you are, there is nothing that you're not. Because what is not you is not. What is not you is not. You are I am. You are I am. Knowing this, knowing that you are I am, discovering that you are I am in that solitude, in that quiet place. Knowing that you can rest, you can be at ease in anybody's company. You can be at ease knowing that you are I am, that there's nothing that you are not. You can be at ease in anybody's company. There's nothing to become in order to belong when you are everything. There's nothing to become in order to belong when you're at everything. You'll fit right in. Because you belong where you are. When you're there, as you are. There's no one to be but you. No one to be but you. It's all that's required by God. It's all that's required by life itself from you is that you just be yourself. Just be you. Just be you. Just be you. What life's made you to be is life's will for you to be. What life's made you to be is life's will for you to be. What life's made you to be is life's will for you to be. If you being you is all right with God, is okay with God, How can you not be okay with yourself? Or buy into notions that you're not good just as you are, that you're not worthy just as you are. Be yourself with yourself. Be yourself with yourself. Be yourself with yourself. You are the one who will never leave you or forsake you. You are the one. You are the one who will never leave you or forsake you. You are the one who will never leave you or forsake you, because you cannot escape you. Wherever you go, there you are. You are a friend that sticks closer than a brother. So just be yourself in simplicity. Be yourself in simplicity. Be yourself in simplicity. Simply be you. The simple person, though, is not the simpleton. The simple person is not the simpleton. The simpleton's mind is scattered all over the place. And having his mind and his attention spread out all over the place, his being becomes very shallow. Becomes very shallow. Yet the simple person's attention, that's singular. That's whole. That's one. And that's why he's deep in his being. There's a deep wisdom there. There's a deep presence there. And out of that depth of being present, very little needs to be said. Because when you're present in that way, the present speaks for itself. The simple person, instead of his attention being given to many matters, it's rather on what matters the most. The simple man, the simple person, attention is not given to many matters, but it's rather given to what matters the most. Recall what Lao Tzu said that we read earlier. In thinking, keep to the simple. In thinking, keep to the simple. Take care not to allow thought to embellish itself. Take care not to allow your thoughts to embellish themselves. Take care not to let your thoughts dress themselves, clothe themselves. Don't build a story. Don't build a story around the thought. Just let the thought be there without the story. We don't need to spin a story, do we? Of course, when we're spinning the story, we generally don't realize it, or we probably wouldn't do it. But if we catch it quickly, if we catch it early, when that story spinner, that spider-like thing inside you that likes to spin that web of a story, if we can catch that thing early and quickly when it's weaving its first strand, all of a sudden we can decide not to let that web be spun, that story be spun, that web of deception, that web of unreality to take form. So in our thinking, we need to think as is. Think as is. Think I am. Think in real time. In real time. When you think in real time, thinking in real time, what does it mean to think in real time? Well, we can ask ourselves, what is true right now? What is true right now? What is true right now? For what was true last year, a week ago, a month ago, a day ago, concerning somebody or something, may no longer be actual, may no longer be real at all. Perhaps a month ago they were angry at you. And in between then and now, they may have forgiven you. So what was true then is not true now. They're no longer angry at you. It's not true that they're angry at you. What's true now is that they've forgiven you. So this is where discernment comes in. We have to recognize the truth that is the truth right now. Because the truth that is the truth right now is the only truth that there really is. People's hearts, their minds, their personalities change. And if we're going to stay connected with the truth, if we're going to stay connected with the truth, we have to be forgiving of everything. Not just the bad things, not just the things that hurt us, but the good as well. We have to, if we're going to stay connected with the truth, we have to practice forgiving, letting go of everything, the good and the bad. Forgiving being, in the sense that I'm talking here, letting go of what was. Letting go of what was. Whether they were good or bad, smart or stupid, whatever they were yesterday is not what they are today. So we have to be forgiving of it, all of it, you know. Hold to nothing, but let it all go. Because none of that stuff, none of that junk, none of those forms are eternally true. They're not eternally true. They're impermanent. They change. All of our mental fabrications change. All of our notions of who somebody is, of what they think, of what they feel, of what they like, of what they dislike, are nothing more than notions. They're impermanent. They're not faithful in their being. And because of the impermanent nature of the mind, the mind itself cannot know what is eternal. Because to know what is eternal, you have to know it from being eternal. Who knows what's in the mind of a duck but a duck? I don't know what goes through a duck's mind because I'm not a duck. Oh. How can I know what's in God's mind unless I am? But He's given us His Spirit. He's given us His mind, hasn't He? Yeah, He has. Yeah, He has. But the mind itself, the carnal mind, can't know what is eternal because it itself is not eternal. It itself is not eternal. The eternal is known not by thinking, but by love. St. Paul in his epistle to the church at Corinth said that knowledge would pass away. And he told us to hold the love rather than knowledge. To hold the love rather than knowledge. Because the love is what remains. The faith, the hope, the love, that's the kind of stuff that sticks around, that remains. Hold to that. Knowledge passes away. Let it. Don't try to concretize a belief or a notion. Let those things pass away. And we can begin to think wholesomely. We can begin to think with that mind of God that's been given us, out of that singularity of heart, out of that oneness. Out of that one will, out of that willingness. Without trying to take the truth apart, without dissecting it. But we can start to flow and discern and judge righteously by just kind of resting and abiding in that awareness, that mind of God, that spirit of truth, that spirit, Holy Spirit, that spirit of wholeness, that spirit, that essence of oneness, that seeing things as they are, you know. And then we can set aside the thinking and use it for what it's designed for, but we learn not to use thinking for what it's not designed for. There's things that thinking is good for, but there's things that thinking was not designed for. Making decisions from the heart rather than rationale. Some decisions have no business being made with the rationale. Some decisions that you're required to participate in your lifetime have no business being addressed with the thinking mind, with the rationale of the ego, but can only be adeptly and correctly and sufficiently decided upon by the heart that longs to abide and know truth. By the heart that longs to abide in and know love. So that the decisions come out of being rather than thinking. So that the decisions come out of being rather than thinking. That's the wise one. And keeping it simple isn't about thinking on one thing in particular. It's not keeping it simple is not a forcing of the mind to think one thing in particular. Keeping in simplicity is very simple. It has nothing to do with force of will upon the mind. It has everything to do with abandonment and surrender of the mind, of the will, so that we become willing to be simple rather than trying to force ourselves to be something that we already are. We do that. We try to force ourselves to be something that we already are. Trying to be somebody you're not, and trying to be somebody that you already are. Both manners of forcing are folly that are bound to lead a person into deep frustration. So keeping it simple is not to force ourselves to think on one thing in particular. It's to focus on the one thing that is everything. And to know the everything within the one thing. I'll say that once more. It's to focus on the one thing that is everything, and to know the everything within the one thing. Absorbed into being rather than thinking. To put our attention on the one thing that is everything and know the everything within the one thing. We come into this world as we're born into this world as individuals. We're born into being somebody. We're conditioned to become somebody. But if we leave this life as an individual, as somebody, rather than the body itself of Christ, if we leave as an individual, we have learned nothing worthwhile while we're here. This is why we must be born again. We have to be born into the oneness, into that awareness of that oneness that we already are. Born back into being one, rather than born into being someone in particular. So it's not about forcing ourselves into a set way of thinking. What that is called obsession. Obsession. To force ourselves to feel compelled to believe one notion, one thing, and wrap our whole self up in that thing. That's obsession. An obsession is a form of idolatry. Holding on to an image, holding on to a notion, holding on to a thinking that you know. Holding on to a thinking that you know, rather than a knowing that you think. Idolatry is holding on to an image, a notion of thinking that you know, rather than knowing what you think. Can we discern that difference between thinking that we know and knowing what we think? So keeping it simple isn't this obsession with thinking we know. It's not to be stuck in a cycle of thinking. It's rather the freedom from obsessive thought. It's thinking that is forgiving in its nature. It's not thinking that does not feed itself. But there's this way of addressing life without making it complicated, without making it difficult, without making it serious. There's a way of praying rather than thinking. We can pray without ceasing. We can keep watch diligently. We can stay awake. It's not about thinking without ceasing, but nor is it about ceasing to think. This is not about thinking without ceasing or ceasing to think, either one, but it's all about giving our attention to the life that's here now, being watchful, prayerful, in connection with our awareness to the actual life that's here, to stay in that communion with the Lord, with God, with life. St. Paul said this. St. Paul writes, he said, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatsoever is true, noble, right, pure, whatsoever is lovely, admirable. If anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you've learned and received or heard from me or seen in me, put that into practice. The God of peace will be with you. So we're exhorted, we're encouraged to think on simple things, true things, admirable things, praiseworthy things, to give our attention to things that stir up our heart to praise God, to appreciate life, to ignite our passion for living. Rather than trying to manage life by our thinking. Rather than trying to manage life by our thinking, pray, pray, pray. Pray in faith so that the peace which transcends all understanding, so that this peace which transcends all the thinking swallows up, eats it alive, all those things that attack your spirit and suck the joy out of you. You know? There's another way of thinking. What if? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if Trump becomes president? What if Hillary dies? What if this country will attack us? What if I get sick? What if? We can turn that what if around so that it eats itself alive. Instead of thinking, what if this happens? What if that happens? We can think, what if God has it all under control? What if I don't need to worry about life? What's that like? What if I don't need to worry? What if God has all this under control? What if everything I've thought is not necessarily true? What if all this stuff is working together for my good? What if I just don't see it? What if, what if God's going to surprise me? What if, there's all kinds of, we can turn that what if all the way around, Instead of playing out the worst scenario and then convincing ourselves that we need to build bigger barns and bank accounts to prepare ourselves for the worst, we can give our cares to God in prayer and simply be like children that don't fret or worry, but leave all the caring up to their parents. So we don't need to let our hearts be troubled by what God has already prepared for us to enter into. We can dive into life with this fearless, willing heart, without worrying, without making things serious and complicated. Simple, not serious, not complicated. It's in that simplicity that we find our joy. And out from that joy we get our power to live. To live. So today, let's just choose joy. Let's just choose joy. Let's just choose not to worry. Let's just choose to abandon ourselves to the generosity and the ability and the capacity of God to just love us and care for us. You know? Let's just do that. And with that, I'm going to say namaste. Thank you. I'm finished.